Unreal Blueprints. Example. Simple doors. The use of the quotations around simple is ironic within this title, because as we will learn in this example, doors are actually a lot more complicated than we think they are. So let's start with kind of what we know. We already know we can create blueprints, which are subclasses of existing actors. When we create those blueprints, which are graphs and nodes, graphs are collections of nodes, and nodes are defined functionality, we can start to define different things, define sequence of events that should happen when different other things happen. So in this example, what we want to do is we want to create a simple door. And as we're going to see, it's not particularly as simple as it seems. But let's jump over to Unreal and look at this. So over in Unreal, you'll see I have a copy of the third-person template. I've created a new project using game, selected the third-person template, and it's given me this right here. So as you can see, as I move around using this right here, we've got a little person who's going to move around within this sort of defined level space right here. Now I want to define a somewhat simple door, and again, it's going to be slightly deceptive. So I'm going to define this wall over here, and I'll select it. So over here, wall 10 within my world outliner is going to be my door, quote unquote. So to make sure I know what this is, let's right click this, go down to edit, and then I want to go ahead and rename, and notice over here it would have been F2. So I'm going to call this wall 10 underscore door. So now I know this is the door I want. So what do I want to happen? As I approach the door, what I want to happen is for the door to raise up. And notice here, down here in this lower left-hand corner of the viewport, we have Z, X, and Y. Notice Z is up and down within Unreal in this case, and it's blue. And that matches the little blue color over here. So we want it to move up, we want to use the Z axis. Okay. So I want to approach the door, and when I approach the door, I want the door to raise. Now this requires a couple of different things here. The first of which if I want to approach the door and have it react to something, I probably need a trigger of some kind. It sounds like, without making this overly complicated, we probably just want a box trigger. Our two sort of simple examples are box trigger, notice over here, basic, down here, box trigger. This is shaped like a box, or a sphere trigger. And it doesn't really sound like we need a sphere trigger, which are much more in cases where we want to fill a space or fill a certain volume. Sounds like we actually just want to define a box somewhere. So I'm going to click and drag box trigger out of place actors and put it into my level right here. Let's move it up a little bit, and I'll kind of zoom in so we can see it over here. And we've got our tiny little box. Notice it added trigger box down here at the bottom of the world outliner. Well, our box is very, very small, and I want this entire wall to be a door. So let's make this bigger. So coming over here then, if I want to expand out, I can scale using this third option up here. And let's scale this a bit. So I will, using my mouse, make this quite a bit bigger. Expand this all the way out. Or alternatively, if I wanted, I'll just move this up a little bit. I could have come down here and changed this scale for X and filled this entire thing right here. So zooming out a little bit, we see I filled this entire space, and I'm going to just move this a little bit closer to the door. Because what I want to happen is when we pass into it, I want this door to raise. Now, it sounds like if we want different actions to happen, we probably want some scripting, which means we probably want some blueprints. So one thing we could do then is we can make a decision about where we want this code to happen. Now, what we know so far is we can create a blueprint on any existing actor, which means if we want, we could put the blueprint inside the trigger, or put the blueprint for the wall, or potentially even put the blueprint on the player character as well. But to make things a little bit simpler, let's put the blueprint as part of the box trigger. So when the box is overlapped, that is when the player character crosses into the space of the box trigger, we want a wall to raise or our door to raise. So I've got the box trigger selected right here. I'm going to come down to Blueprint Add Script. I'm going to create a new subclass. And it's going to create it over here and load it. Okay, so notice it's got a box trigger loaded right here as the visual viewport of it. We don't technically need that right now. So I'm going to come over here to the event graph because I want to deal with events. So remember I mentioned that as we approach the door, I want something to happen. So the thing I want something to happen is I want the wall to raise. So in which case, let's think about this a little bit. if I want to approach the door, and that is overlap with the box trigger called trigger box, I want something else to happen. So it sounds like we probably want some type of physics event, some type of an on hit or an on overlap. In fact, overlap's probably the better choice. So triggers, and especially box triggers and sphere triggers, are unique in that the collision does not happen on the actor, it happens on the component, which seems a little bit strange until you kind of think about it. It's trigger, so it's designed to be triggered, that is, you walk through it, and if you're walking through it, that means the collision's not happening on the actor itself. So to help us kind of understand this better, notice over here I have a list of components within here, and if I click on collision component and then scroll down its details, I'm going to see a whole list of things: on hit, on begin overlap, on end overlap, and etc., etc. So it sounds like we probably want on overlap, so while I'm standing within the box trigger. So let's just click on the plus, and that will automatically add it to our event graph for this. Okay, so we have in our event graph. So when we overlap, we want something to happen. What do we want to happen? Well, we want the door to move. So now we've got kind of an interesting problem, because the thing we want to move is not the thing colliding, which is to say the player character colliding with the box trigger component, but a completely different actor. So it sounds like we probably want a variable to hold the value of that actor, and then we will change it from there. So let's go ahead and create a new variable. And let's call this DoorReference. Okay, so by default, the variable type is Boolean, but that's not what we need. We want a reference to another actor in the level, in the map. So let's change its type. Clicking on the dropdown, we have all the sort of defaults, and then into object types, because all actors are objects, we can click this and we see even more. So I want a reference to an actor and an object reference over here. Now, this may seem a little bit strange, but I'm not referencing an actor that is a more abstract thing. I'm referencing something that exists. So this isn't an object reference. A reference to something that exists within the level or the map already, not something I'm creating or is created as another process. So this exists, we want a reference to it. Boom, got it. Okay, so DoorReference, which is an actor, it's an object reference. Now, we run into a little bit of a problem here, because if I compile and save, and right now this doesn't do anything, but then if I return to the Unreal Editor and I want to somehow assign the door to the value of this variable. Okay, so there's a little bit of a problem. How do we do that? Well, remember that if we want to edit a variable somewhere else outside of that blueprint, we want to make it public. Except Unreal doesn't use that term. It uses a special term, instance editable. So moving back then to the blueprints, right here, we want to make this instance editable right here. And notice on the tooltip, it says whether this is publicly editable. So click this, we'll recompile and save. And then let's minimize this for the moment. And as soon as I did that, I get access to default. Notice I'm still selected in the world outliner and default. So this needs a reference to another actor in this scene. So, okay, what do we want to reference? Well, potentially we could click this drop down and it would give us everything in the world outliner right here, and we could scroll through and kind of find what we want. And there's it is right there, wall 10 door. Alternatively, we could have used this little dropper and literally just dropped it and picked out the thing we want, but we have it right now. So, okay, we have the actor reference we need, and when this level starts, we will automatically get that reference and it will pass to this blueprint as a value. So let's return then to the blueprints right here, and I've got this pulled up on a different window. Okay, so what we want to happen is when we begin to overlap, I want the door to move Z up. So Z up is what's known as the transform. And there is an existing node called AddActorLocalOffset. So we can, with an existing actor, change its local offset. That is, we can tell it to move a certain amount. To do that, we need a reference to that actor and its transform. But we have that now, our door reference. So let's click and drag door reference over. And we want to get the reference. So this is the value, whatever this is when it started, when the door was passed into this, we will have it. Click and drag off this output pin. Okay, and now what we want is local offset. So add actor local offset. And okay, for whatever this is, change its right here to Z, let's just say 100. So move it 100 units up into the air is what we want. So in order for this to execute, it needs to be connected to something else. So let's connect the execution pin of this to the execution pin of that. And so now, based on this reference, when the trigger box collision component is overlapped, so this is what this event is, it will run this functionality, AddActorLocalOffset, and the target will be the DoorReference. So DoorReference is a variable containing the reference to wall 10 or wall 11 underscore door. So let's compile this and save it. So let's minimize and play this. So what we want to happen is when I run towards this door, it should move, shouldn't it? It should move. Well, let's press escape and go out. Oh, we got an interesting problem right here. And it says mobility problem. Oh, well, we've set something has to be movable if you'd like to move it. Well, that makes complete sense. Thank you. So let's close this. So what it just said was, hey, you attempted to move something, but Unreal was told it wouldn't move. So up here, wall 10 door, select this. And down here in mobility, it's not going to be static. It's going to be movable. So set that. Okay, let's replay. Turn, walk over here. And there it is. It moved up 100 units. And we moved out, and that's not really quite enough. But that's okay, because we can keep doing it. Keep changing the local offset. As we keep overriding the, doing the overlap right here, it keeps moving up. And there we go, right there. So we can escape. So not a terribly exciting example right here, but the first steps towards a door. So when we overlap, move it up 10. Well, what if we want it to come back down? Okay, so let's think about that. When I approach the door, I want the door to move up. And as we saw, 100 is not really a good value, so we'll just use like 1,000. And then when we're not overlapping, go ahead and move the door back down again. Okay, so let's do that. So moving back to the blueprint, let's get them a little more advanced. So when this overlap happens, change the local offset to, let's change it to 1,000. Put the 0 in the right place, 1,000. Okay, so move up by 1,000. And then when we're not overlap, move it down by 1,000. So let's come back to this and let's scroll down here. And we're currently using begin overlap, so let's use end overlap. And there's our other event right here. Okay, so let's just do the same thing over again. So in this case, let's, instead of adding another one, just drag this over and say, okay, look for local offset right here. And we'll connect these execution pins. And instead of 1,000, we'll make it negative 1,000. And compile and save. So what's happening now? Well, when we begin the overlap, move it up by 1,000. And when we end the overlap, move it down by 1,000. Now, this is going to be a little bit silly because it's going to continuously check when we're on the overlap, but this will get the job done. So let's save this. And now let's play this again. So when I run over, right up to the thing, moves up 1,000. If we move down, it moves down 1,000. Move up, move down, move up, move down. Okay, stop. So a pretty simple door, quote unquote, as part of this example. But notice by having a reference to another actor, and especially an object reference to another actor within the world outliner, within the level, we can manipulate it, and especially manipulate its values. So in this case, we created a box trigger, and we knew that box trigger, the collision happens on the components. So we went into creating a blueprint, and then we clicked on its components where the collisions happen, collision component right there in the name. Scroll down to the bottom for its existing events. We used first on component begin overlap. Then we created a variable to the actor we wanted to adjust. We use the node AddActorLocalOffset to change the local offset, moving it up by 1,000 along the z-axis. Then later we came back and added an end overlap using the same reference, and again using AddActorLocalOffset for -1000. Not a terribly advanced project, but again, reviewing all the information we know, using variables, using blueprints, and showing some somewhat simple interactions to create a quote-unquote simple door.